Hello, guys, and welcome back to the With a Minute to Go podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you do enjoy it, and turn notifications on so you do not miss a thing. You can also find us on Spotify by typing in With a Minute to Go pod, or by accessing the link via our social medias on Instagram and Twitter at WAMTGpod. So quickly, before we do start, on the topic of last week's episode, I did say I'd put a poll out to let you guys decide whether you wanted to see North versus South to be played out on FIFA or Football Manager. So the results are in, and FIFA won 54% of the vote. So I have recorded the footage of the game, or games, because it's over 2 legs, and I'll be posting that along with the result later on Instagram. All I'll say for now is Bruno Fernandes made a decent impact over the 2 legs, probably as you'd be expected. So, Matt, how are you, mate? It's good to have you back on.
Yeah, I'm doing well. I just don't think I've come down from the weekend yet. So, I had an enjoyable weekend, or enjoyable Sunday anyway. But yeah, looking forward to having a good chat about it as well today.
Yeah, definitely. We're 2 Arsenal fans, so I think it's only right that we do touch on the North London derby. But, this week will be probably slightly shorter than the last couple of weeks. We appreciate it has been pretty long. I think there was one that was an hour and 40 minutes, and there was one that was an hour and 30. So they've been good episodes, but maybe slightly longer than we want to put out. I think we're going to aim for between an hour and an hour and 15 for most episodes. So no guests this week, unfortunately, but we do have Matt with us. So we'll be discussing the North London derby. In my opinion, one of the worst title defences in Premier League history, and potential punishments for referees. I think that would be a very interesting one to discuss. Obviously, both of us watch a lot of the Premier League, and you get to experience it at a national level as well. So it should be interesting to discuss that one later on. But we'll start with, I think, the topic we can probably offer most insight on, the North London derby. Firstly, the big thing before the game started, Aubameyang dropped for discipline reasons. I think, obviously, our brother Lewis spoke to you before the game, and you said you were in Aubameyang's camp. Me personally, I wasn't too sure where I was sitting with this, but I think it did come out that Aubameyang was late, and he has been a couple of times. So do you think that was right to have him drop from the team for this game?
Yeah, I'm not in Aubameyang's camp. I'm firmly in Arteta's camp. I think it's hard for fans to understand that, especially when it's a game of that magnitude and a player who is, Arsenal's best player. He's the match winner for Arsenal, or a match winner. So when you see him not in the squad or not in the team, but on the bench, 100% fit, and then drop for discipline reasons, and then it wasn't long before we found out that actually it was because he was late. And I know a lot of people's actually, it doesn't matter. It's Aubameyang. We need him in the team. He needs to play. But, being in that team environment, being in that football environment, being late to a game or being late to a training is one of the worst things you can do. I know you'd see floating around on social media, sometimes clubs' fines lists get leaked, or sometimes you do a behind-the-scenes tour of a stadium and there's a fine list up on the wall in a changing room. I think it was Frank Lampard's one at Chelsea was quite a recent one. And the vast sums of money that players have to pay out for being late. Now, it doesn't stop them being late. In every club, there'll be players who do regularly turn up late and are regularly fined. But I think on a match day, when you've got to be in for a certain time, and even more the magnitude of the game, the North London derby, a massive game, you are the club captain. To turn up late is unforgivable. Traffic happens, of course. I think there was a picture that went out that he was stuck in traffic. But that happens, and you have to make sure that you prepare for that. Any walk of life, any job, you can't keep turning up late. There will be repercussions if you do so. So I understand why people were probably, and definitely Arsenal fans were not happy that Arteta had gone with that stance. But I think it also sets a precedent towards other players. If he can get away with it, why can't I? Or whatnot. It needs to be straight down the middle. And whether it was your best player in Aubameyang or a squad player or a young player, I think they all need to be treated the same. I think that's the most important thing to take from it. Luckily, it wasn't an issue in the end. It wasn't a problem, and obviously Arsenal won. But again, 100% in Arteta's camp, and I would have been if Arsenal would have lost the game too, not just because Arsenal won.
Yeah, apologies there. Obviously, I said you were in Aubameyang's camp, and you're not. You're in Arteta's camp. Fair enough. I can see where you're coming from there. Obviously, you've got that coaching background as well. For me, you know, given the things that have come out the last few months since Arteta's been there, obviously he's fallen out with Guendouzi quite notably, and he's gone out on loan to Hertha Berlin. And then there was rumours about David Luiz, and when Arsenal were going through that poor patch, there was maybe one or two members of the camp that were speaking to the media and leaking things. So for me, with this Aubameyang thing, originally before the details came out, I was firmly, in his camp. But at the end of the day, given the situation and given the fact that he's explained he's been late a few times, then I can understand why he needs to set that precedence. Not just because he's the club captain that he should play the game, but actually it should be equal for everyone. So, yeah, I do like that in the end. I'm in Arteta's camp for that. Right, Spurs' lineup. Right, I looked at that. I've got to be honest with you. I was pretty scared. Obviously, Son, Bale, Kane, Lucas Moura, very attacking. It seemed as though Jose would attack and be very positive, and actually he did the complete opposite in the first 15 minutes. Nobody really pressed our centre backs. I know in previous games, looking at especially Burnley, obviously the goal we conceded with Xhaka basically just kicking it at Chris Wood, you'd think you'd get the likes of Kane, Bale, Son chasing our centre backs down, but actually that didn't happen. So just wanted to get your take on what you thought about Mourinho's approach to this game. I've spoken to a few Tottenham fans that were obviously not too pleased with the end result and how he went about it, but from an Arsenal perspective, I think we're quite happy with that.
Yeah, I think I'll be honest. The first game before Christmas, where Spurs won 2-0 at home, I was in and out that game. I had other things that I was doing at the time, but it seemed to have a similar sort of feel to it. Mourinho, Spurs sat off, let Arsenal have a lot of the ball, but countered really well. And they obviously got their 2 goals before half time. I don't think they had another chance in there, and then saw the game out in the second half. So first of all, for Arteta, I didn't think maybe he would set up in the same way as he did there, where Arsenal would be really subject to counterattacks, which we know Spurs, you listed the players, can do so well. But it's sort of a similar sort of feel in terms of Arsenal did have a lot of the ball and Spurs were definitely playing on that counterattack, and it just didn't really happen. But again, the first 15 minutes, Arsenal were really, really strong. Like you said, Arsenal's weaknesses of late have been playing out from the back and being pressed and forced into mistakes. And they didn't have any problems there at all. They were able to move the ball well. I can't remember any instances in the game where they were really pressed into a time where you thought, they might lose it here or not at all through the whole game. It was really strange to say. I know why Mourinho's done it, because obviously he had success in the first fixture between the two teams, but at the same time, I just think looking at Arsenal in recent weeks, you would have changed, especially with the personnel Spurs have, to press them a little bit more, make it a lot harder for Arsenal. But again, I was very worried before the game, but after the first 15 minutes, I was calm, and I thought, Arsenal could win this game. And to be fair, I know we'll speak about it in a minute, even after the Spurs goal, which was totally against the run of play, was their first shot on target or first shot on goal. I'm still quite confident that Arsenal could take at least a point, if not 3, because of the way they're playing and how Spurs would play.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, from an Arsenal perspective, obviously, looking at that team and then going into the game, the adrenaline's pumping. As a fan, I was very nervous, and getting through that first 15 minutes was big for us, and we actually looked very comfortable. So that was very surprising for me. And then came, I think it was just over half an hour in the game, Lamela's goal. Absolutely ridiculous, but demoralising for us fans. I think that's something that they discussed on Sky Sports after the game. He's quite comfortable with that sort of technique, the Rabona, obviously. And then Odegaard equalised quite quickly before half time. So how important was that goal for Arsenal going into half time?
Yeah, it's a massive goal and a massive time. if Spurs are able to get in at 1-0, it changes the team talks at halftime, which is a cliche thing, is said often. It shapes the second half. Arsenal would have sat in there and thought, we've played so well, we've had lots of chances, and we're 1-0 behind. That's a negative feeling. The fact that they were able to get that goal, and no surprise it come from the left-hand side, where they were a constant threat for the first half. Lots of opportunities coming from there, and again, slightly fortuitous with the goal, with the finish and the deflection. But Odegaard's probably his best game in an Arsenal shirt, and it's about being in the right place at the right time. Often Tierney or it was Smith Rowe on the day getting to those areas and pulling the ball back, and maybe someone not being there or not finding the right run, but held his run well. And yeah, got a bit of luck with it. But again, massive changing moment in the half now. Arsenal not only have dominated the half, but are not going to go behind. Massive going into half time.
Yeah, I think it was a fully deserved goal, to be honest. I remember earlier in the half, Emil Smith Rowe battered the crossbar from about 25 yards. I think that if that went in, we'd have been off our seats. And then Cedric hit the post, coming onto one just a few minutes before the Odegaard goal. So I do think that was well deserved. And yeah, massive for the whole dynamic of the match in the end, I think. But the big talking point was the penalty in the second half. Now, as a neutral, obviously I'm not neutral, but if I was, I still do think it's a penalty. I think, if it was given against Arsenal, personally, I wouldn't have too many complaints. I watched Match of the Day later in that evening, and Genius wasn't too happy about it. But something I did pick up as he was sort of ridiculing the officials was he just added on at the end, it was high and reckless. Well, yeah, that's why it was given, mate. So I think, it was out of control, reckless. And actually about time Arsenal did get a decision from VAR. So from your perspective, was it a penalty? And if not, why not?
I can see why Spurs are probably slightly aggrieved. I'm maybe not going to say the uproar that has been about it. Lacazette does make a complete fool of himself, massive air kick, or slightly scuffs it, but it's a poor connection or no connection. And definitely should do better. It's a great ball from Pepe. First touch was good, and it set up nicely to hit it. I think what you said is right. It's the recklessness. Diving into, yes, he's trying to block the tackle, fine. Block the strike, sorry, which is fine. But again, I think when you lunge in like that and you're high and you're off the ground, and you leave your leg there trailing, then that's going to be a foul. I think that. A couple of people saying, Lacazette fell into him. I'm not so sure that was necessarily the case. I can see why it was a little bit fortuitous, because he said he's had an air kick. But at the same time, if that was happened anywhere else in the pitch and the ball wasn't in play, I know we discussed this the other day. If you play the man and you don't play the ball, it's a foul. Mm-hmm. So for me, there we are. That's the end of the matter. He played the man. He didn't play the ball. All right. Was the ball under control from Lacazette? You could argue no. But it was late, and he's fouled him. And again, I think the referee obviously gave the penalty. I've heard different things from different referee pundits. Dermot Gallagher, I think, on Sky, suggesting that VAR couldn't intervene or wouldn't intervene. I'm not really sure what he was trying to get out there, but obviously there was no need to. Well, they decided there was no need to use the pitch side monitor, and obviously the decision stood.
Yeah, for me, obviously there's a lot of debate over this, but I remember, I think it was December 2019, Chelsea won away at Tottenham, and their first goal was a penalty. Gazaniga came out, the ball went away. I think it was off the pitch and clattered Alonso. And obviously it's a very, it's a different sort of situation. But for me, it's actually very similar, because the ball's gone, but the players still come and clattered the opposite player. So for me, that is still a penalty. And at the end of the day, even if I wasn't an Arsenal fan, I would definitely be sticking by that. Eric Lamela, we'll go on to him now. Typical Lamela. Obviously got sent off 2 yellows. I think he could have had probably 5 or 6 yellows in the whole game. I think it was a deserved red card in the end. But overall, obviously, a big win for Arsenal. I think they need to back it up next week against West Ham. I think that's very important. But also Arteta would have got a lot of stick, like we've said, if he didn't win. Just quickly before I do go on to Tottenham, I want to say Harry Kane did nothing. In the whole game, it's a big game. He's been in fantastic form against Burnley. Couple of goals, couple of assists. How do you think he played in this game? Because for me, from my perspective, he didn't do a great deal other than foul Gabriel and sort of back into people.
Well, he hit the post, didn't he? And also he had a goal disallowed, rightly disallowed, to be fair. I don't know whether I know he came off in the week previous, didn't he, on the Thursday night, with a bit of a knock. I'm not sure whether he possibly was or wasn't 100% fit. But I also don't think the way that Spurs set up helped him. He wasn't able to get on the ball. I think the graphic went up after about 75 minutes where he hadn't touched the ball in the Arsenal penalty area, which is so unlike him. And once he does get half a chance or a touch in the penalty area, there's going to be shots and inevitably going to be goals. So I think Arsenal did a job, to be fair, on him. But I'm not sure. He didn't necessarily look 100% fit. But, if Harry Kane's 75, 80% fit, you still play him, especially in those sort of games.
Yeah, I think Heung-min Son obviously got subbed off after 20 minutes. That didn't really help him at all. Bringing Lamela on changed the whole dynamic of that front three. So yeah, that's probably a big contributing factor as to why he wasn't great. Obviously, he did hit the post, and then Davinson Sanchez got that header in, and Gabriel, fantastic clearance. We were relieved at that. But what does this mean for Spurs? I think these are the exact performances why Mourinho has his fair share of critics, both neutral and Spurs fans. If they go trophyless this year and continue to play the same brand of football, do you think that potentially he'll get the sack?
He needs to win a trophy, for me. Obviously, they've got a great chance, a good chance in the final against Manchester City. I think City are probably the favourites for that, but I wouldn't be surprised if Spurs turn them over. I think they've got a good record in recent years against Man City. But again, Man City, it's a competition that Man City regularly win. So interesting. But I mean, I think let's just discuss maybe the last 10 minutes of the game. Spurs down to 10 men. All of a sudden, chasing the game. There was an attacking intent about them. Arsenal, to be fair, helped them out a little bit because they were very nervy on the ball. They didn't manage the last 10 minutes well, even with a man advantage. But all of a sudden, there was an attacking threat from Spurs. There was more energy about them. I said Kane hit the post. They had the one off the line from Gabriel. Obviously, goal disallowed. All of a sudden, they're causing Arsenal problems. And I guess Spurs fans are sitting there thinking, why have we not done this for the last 80 minutes? And if we had, if it's well documented that neither defence are very strong, neither defence are that reliable. I couldn't tell you who's a better defence at the minute because there's not many defenders in there that I'd necessarily want in my team. But I don't understand why there was such a negative approach, and that's probably the frustration for Spurs fans that actually when they've got a front four like you keep saying, Son, Bale, Kane, Lucas Moura, they've got those sort of players. Dele Alli came on, Lamela, Why would they not want to play a little bit more attacking? Why are they not going to go for a team like Arsenal who defensively are weak or they've got a weak defence? So. But yeah, I think if Mourinho doesn't win a trophy this year, well, I'll flip it the other way. I think the only way he can stay in a job, or the Spurs fans will accept it, is either finishing in the top four, which they have a chance, but I'm not sure they will, or winning a trophy. And the best hope at the minute is the Carabao Cup because they're in the final, but I think they have a chance in Europa League. I don't think there's many strong teams left in Europa League. Obviously, we're recording before the second leg. I envisage Spurs to get through comfortably. Touch wood, Arsenal will get through with a commanding lead. The Man United game is up in the air at the minute, and they're probably the next two strongest teams in the competition, Milan and Man United. So I think they've got a chance in that. So let's see, but I say it's a big couple of months for Spurs and for Mourinho, and I think a lot of fans, their patience is very much wearing thin. I think if you're not playing good football and winning games, that's okay. or winning trophies. When you're not playing good football and you're losing games and not winning things, then there's a problem there. And the same old questions will be asking the summer about their better players and maybe wanting to move on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you just touched on there the last 10 minutes of the game. And obviously, they came out of the blocks. They really sort of exploded on a tiring Arsenal team. Maybe that trip to Greece was really showing then. Obviously, they had that win the previous week against Burnley, 4-0, and they've won well against the lesser teams. Do you think maybe because they're playing, an Arsenal, even though we're not brilliant this year, it's a name? And do you think maybe that sort of fear factor came into it as to why they maybe didn't express themselves, attacking wise as well as they could?
Possibly, but we saw early in the season the 2-0 win against Arsenal. They played that way and they won 2-0. Sam mentioned it when he was on a couple of weeks ago. His favourite game for Spurs was when they beat Man City 2-0. They played exactly the same way there. Were dominated by Man City, caught them on the counter-attack, 1-2-0. So Mourinho, he could turn and say, well, we played this way before against so-called bigger teams. And I say so-called because Arsenal are 10th in the league or still, so and with relative success. So there's no reason maybe for him not to play that way. But, as we saw at the weekend, a more attacking intent, I would have been really worried for Arsenal on Sunday.
Yeah, definitely. Likewise. And just on Arsenal, before we do move on to talking about Liverpool, it did come out that Aubameyang left without completing his warm down with the other unused subs. Potentially could he be left out of West Ham as a punishment for that? Obviously, we've discussed how turning up late didn't help his cause for starting this game, and then you've backed that up. So, what would be sort of a fair punishment for that, in your opinion?
I think that if that is true, I think that's poor. I think you're the club captain. You've made a mistake. You got to put your hands up, accept it. Also be a team player. The team have just won. They've just won a massive game. Yes, you weren't a part of it, but that was your own fault. You were going to start. You do what everyone else is doing. There's other unused subs that would have loved to have been on the pitch just like you had, and you didn't take your opportunity where, so I think and also that you're the club captain, however you act needs to, you're showing everyone, the younger players, and there's a lot of young players at Arsenal at the minute. You've got to be a leader not just what you do on the pitch, but the way you act off the pitch. So, that's disappointing. And I think question marks maybe have been asked about him before, and maybe is he a real leader? He's a leader in terms of on the pitch he'll score goals. Is he the role model that Arsenal want as a club captain? Maybe not.
Yeah, I think those leadership and role model values have really got to filter down. Obviously, we've seen it in Arteta in terms of punishing Aubameyang, and rightly so. But again, club captain, I believe it was 25 minutes after full time, he was out of the building and away. So, in my opinion, that's pretty poor. And yeah, overall disappointing because I wouldn't really expect that of him. I think he's a team player. Obviously, disappointed to be left out of the team, but at the end of the day, it was in his control what happened there. So it'd be interesting to see if he is left on the bench or he does get a start against West Ham, but I can't see him really being left out of the squad. It's a big game against to say an informed side would be an understatement. They've been fantastic this year, West Ham. Right, we'll move on then to Liverpool this year. I've got quite a few bullet points here because I think there's a lot to talk about with Liverpool. Firstly, obviously, their injuries. I think they've been very unlucky. Most notably, the centre-back pairing that went missing through injury in October. I think it was both of them. Van Dijk was with the high-profile injury against Everton. Obviously, Pickford took him out. And then Joe Gomez, I think, during England training, I think he was injured. Even with that, I didn't really expect Liverpool to be this bad. Obviously, 18 centre-back partnerships. I'm going to ask you anyway. How much of an effect has that had on this Liverpool side this year?
I think first of all, you take out the spine or the defensive spine of any team in any league, and they're going to be severely weakened. But I suppose when you look at Liverpool and you look at the attacking threat that they have or have had, the informed players going forward, and obviously added Diogo Jota to that in the summer, you think, well, if they're going to concede a few more goals because they haven't got the likes of Van Dijk and they haven't got the likes of Gomez, they're still going to score lots of goals. You know, they're still going to win games. They might not be winning 3 or 4-0. It might be 2-1 or 3-2, for example. So it's not just defensively, I feel going forward as well, the other way. They have not been as good. They haven't scored as many goals. Although we did speak about Salah last week, still the top scorer in the league. Obviously, Jota come in, hit the ground running, has been out injured, come back on Monday night, scored the winner. But in terms of 18 centre-back partnerships, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily, you know, that's not to the blame of the manager. I think that's just really unfortunate circumstances where they have lost a lot of players through injury. Obviously, Van Dijk and Gomez. Fabinho's been in there and done well, but had time out injured. Henderson even dropped in there, but now he's injured as well. It's crazy the amount of injuries they've had, and you know, really, really unfortunate because, like you said, or like I know what you're going to come on to say, you know, for a team that are the league champions, they've really, really, really underperformed this year, even with the players they've had out.
Yeah, I mean, you know, looking from the outside, obviously 2019-20, they were unbeaten until February against Watford. That unbeaten streak came to an end. And I think, you know, I was very much under the illusion that it was all about their attacking prowess. And actually, I didn't realise how much that even just 2 centre-backs made a huge impact on Liverpool. I thought, like you said, they can probably outscore anyone with Salah, Mane. Okay, Firmino's hit and miss, but, you know, he's not a bad player. And then bringing in Jota in the summer, I still thought even with those injuries, they could probably fill in Matip and rotate Fabinho or whatever. And they could still compete right at the top. But obviously that hasn't happened this year. Onto the topic of signings, and obviously you mentioned Diego Jota. One person that I'm going to bring up is Thiago Alcantara, obviously brought in from Munich. There's been a lot of debate on this one. Where do you stand with him? Do you think he's been a success at Liverpool, or do you think he's got a lot of room for improvement?
People aren't going to say it's a success because he's come into a team and they've been poor. I don't necessarily think individually he has been bad. I think a lot of people maybe misunderstood the sort of player he was and felt he was going to come in and be a link between an attacking link between him and the front three, and that's certainly not the player he is. He's more of a sitter. He'll get on the ball and he'll move the ball around, and maybe he wasn't the player Liverpool really needed. I've seen a lot of people saying that actually he was better off going to a Man United, and Donny van der Beek was probably the player Liverpool needed. You know, I think you look at Liverpool with Fabinho and Henderson, they have those sort of players who are sitting midfielders that were superb from last season, that move the ball well in midfield, but they're not the attacking link. So to bring in Thiago, who at the end of the day, fantastic player, was good at Bayern Munich. Obviously, they've let him go for quite a good deal Liverpool got for him. And it just hasn't happened because I think, like I said, I think he's come into a team and it's not his fault that they are necessarily not winning every week. But people are going to look at him as a new sign and go, you know what? You know, he's been an issue. He's played enough games, you know, to have that impact. But as I say, I think I wouldn't say he's a flop. I wouldn't say he's been hot either. I think if you put him in Liverpool's team with Van Dijk and you put him with Gomez behind him and he's playing in midfield with Henderson or playing in midfield with Fabinho and there's one in front, then all of a sudden it's a different ball game.
Yeah, obviously with Van Dijk and Gomez it's going to be different. But even then, I thought after those injuries, you put Matip in, Fabinho maybe can slot in as well, and then you know you're still going to have Henderson, Thiago, Wijnaldum in the midfield, and therefore that's why I thought that you know they'd probably be in those top two and maybe even still retaining their Premier League winner status, but obviously not. And more recently, the big thing has been the home form. I think they had something like 60 odd games unbeaten at home before this came to an end, and now they're 6 straight defeats. What do you think they need to do to turn it around?
Play away.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. I mean, we saw them against Wolves on Monday night. and they got the 1-0 wins. So, generally they have been a lot better away from home. But again, those 6 straight defeats are going to be planting the seed of doubt into many Liverpool fans' mind as to whether maybe Jurgen Klopp should move on and maybe bring someone like a Steven Gerrard in. I think more Liverpool fans, I've certainly spoken to a few the last few days, are becoming more accustomed to that idea if these performances go on for a bit longer. So, do you think that would be a good move for Liverpool? Obviously, he's been pretty impressive this year at Rangers, taking them to their first league title in over 10 years. Could he be a good replacement for Jurgen Klopp? Maybe not at the end of this year, but maybe at the end of next year.
I think, first of all, Klopp's got a lot of credit in the bank. I think if fans were in the grounds now and they were at Anfield for the next game, they wouldn't be getting on his back. They'd be massively behind him and behind the whole team. I think, like I said, when he took over at Liverpool, we've got to remember they weren't a top side. They had a lot of average players in there, and it's taken time for him to get them to that level. We got them to Champions League final, which they lost. He got them to the Champions League final the following year, which they won, and obviously they won the league as well. Now, for me, he's got a lot of credit in the back. 30 years without winning a league title, and he brings one home. We spoke a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the effect of not having fans. Those fans still haven't really celebrated winning that league at their stadium, and I think that has also been a massive thing. It'll be interesting to see where they go between now and the end of the season. Can they put a run together and maybe have a chance of getting top 4? I still think that's possible because I think they've still got players good enough to get themselves on a run. I think the teams around that top 4 at the minute, maybe not as consistent. I think everyone could beat everyone as well. You get yourself on a run of 5 games and you're 5 wins or whatnot, you're in and around that. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. I don't think they will, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did. Champions League is massive for them. Everyone's talking about 6 straight defeats at home. They've just dispatched Leipzig 4-0, a good Leipzig side, a Leipzig team who are second in the Bundesliga. They comfortably beat them over 2 legs. All right, they're both away from home, so maybe that's maybe that's a reason. But
just quickly, if I can jump in there, for me, Leipzig, I watched both those games, and taking Timo Werner out of that team, they're a real shadow of themselves. Obviously, they're still doing all right in the league. They're second in the Bundesliga, but I feel like you can't really, judge Liverpool off those performances against a very poor Leipzig team.
No, well, I agree. I disagree, because you're judging them against they lost at home to Fulham. I think you can judge them in every game. I think Leipzig are a better team than Fulham. Leipzig are a better team than Brighton. They both won at Anfield. I think I would not be surprised if Liverpool went far in the Champions League. We'll see what the draw brings this week. I think it's on Friday, but I would not be surprised if they made semi-finals or even the final, because, like we said, still got the quality in there. They can get a couple of players back. I know the 2 centre-halves won't be back. And actually, watching the Wolves game on Monday night, maybe got lucky a couple of times. Maybe they could have had a couple of penalties, Wolves. But the centre-halves are playing. The more they play together, the more they're going to build a partnership. And you never know now. You never know, because when you've got that attacking talent, if that just clicks, Liverpool will win more games before the end of the season. Going back to Gerrard, I think Gerrard had an interview the other day and he said that he didn't want it at the minute. He said, why would I want the job? Or, it's Klopp's job. He shouldn't be leaving it. But I think in time, at some point, he will have that job. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. We look at Lampard, obviously different circumstances. Chelsea, first of all, we didn't have any transfer wiggle for the first year. We couldn't bring anyone in. Second year, a lot of players are brought in, maybe a few that he didn't necessarily want. We all know how Chelsea are with their hiring and firing. And Liverpool obviously wouldn't be the same, especially with Gerrard. But it'd be interesting to see how it goes. And obviously, Liverpool fans would absolutely love to have Gerrard as a manager one day. He's one of their own. But I think Jurgen Klopp is now as well. And I think they love him as much as any former player or former manager.
Yeah. For me, I think Gerrard's time at Rangers has obviously been very impressive, but it's hard to overlook the fact that he's probably just just building up his sort of portfolio to try and get that Liverpool job. And obviously, he's won the Champions League with them. He's won FA Cups with them. He hasn't won a Premier League with Liverpool. I think he'll be going back there with a real aim to get that done. Obviously not as a player, but as a manager. Our final point about Liverpool was really what I based this all on, and I think personally it may be the worst title defence in Premier League history. And now, obviously, a lot of people are going to jump on this and say, well, no, because Leicester obviously defending their title from 15-16 and 16-17. I think they finished 12th or something like that. But they were not expected to keep up that form. I think looking at, given the squad, the names, the caliber of player in that team, do you think that maybe, obviously there's a long way to go still, there's still 10 or 11 games, but if they do finish 6th, 7th or 8th, that it may be one of the worst title defences in Premier League history?
I think so, yeah. I don't think you can look past the fact that they are 6th in the league and they're 5 points off the top 4. They were in the top 4. They were going for the title. All of a sudden, not sure they're going to win the title, but they'll be in the top 4. All of a sudden, they're now not in the top 4. There's a lot of teams vying for that, as we just said. And I think probably that's my case in point. There's so many teams that are competing. Okay, no one's competing with Man City at the minute. They're 14 points clear. They're home and hose. That's it. They've won the Premier League. That's the end of discussion. There's so many teams now that can beat each other. They're at the top of the league now, as in, you look back 10, 12 years ago, and you're talking about Premier League. Premier League started in 92. So, 30 years next year.
Yeah, long time.
40 years even. No, 30 years next year.
30 years.
Yeah. But that's, so I don't think it's been as competitive ever. Yeah. Is there even a top 6 anymore? Because if we talk about, first of all, we used to talk about the top 2, and that was probably Arsenal, Man United for a long time. Then it became a 4. Now it's a 6. Now we've got clubs like Leicester's, who are frequently in it, Everton, Aston Villa, West Ham. So it probably will go down as one of the worst title defences in Premier League history. Not in stats, because like you said, Leicester. But yeah, how many games? 10 games to go?
Yeah, roughly. I think it's like 10 or 11, yeah.
If they can get themselves in the top 4, I think they've massively turned it around.
Yeah, I think that point you make there about obviously the top 2 and then 4 and then 6, we were only discussing that yesterday, and that's massive to consider. Because going back 10 years with that top 4, this Liverpool team would probably get into that and probably maybe finish 3rd or 4th in that, and then all of a sudden it's not too bad of a title defence. But with the how competitive the league is at the moment, I think for them to have such a drop off in form, and obviously that home form plays a massive role in that. It's probably only fair that they're included in that discussion for the worst title defence in Premier League history. Right, as ever, we're back again with the scout this week. It's been quite difficult, I think, for this week's player anyway. There's not too many fixtures going on, obviously, with those FA Cup quarterfinals, 8 teams involved in that. So only 6 games going on this week. But before we do get into them, a quick reference to last week's ones. And I'm very, very proud to say I actually got on right. Christensen. I think he was excellent against Leeds. I really do. Obviously, a clean sheet. Another one under Tuchel. So, yeah, I was very pleased with that. Obviously, Bamford going off after I think it was 20 or 30 minutes or something like that. Obviously helped his case. But overall, not a great game. But, it helped my scout for once. So I'm quite pleased with that. I've gained some credibility there. Matt, with your one, you said James Ward-Prowse. That didn't pay off. Obviously, Brighton. I think it was a quite surprising win against Southampton. But I think they overall deserved it. I think Trossard scored a great goal. And yeah, disappointing for you. But you've had some good ones. You've had Dean Akers in the previous week, so I think we're nearly there on that now.
Well, I didn't watch the game, but I can only assume that Southampton didn't have any direct free kicks, because he would have scored them. No.
No, I do actually think I remember one. I think it was saved or something, but yeah, it was close. Anytime Ward-Prowse gets a a set piece, whether it's a corner, free kick, penalty, you think there's going to be a goal coming from it. So I respect the choice there from you. So we'll go into last week's players. I'll go first on this one. For me, it was very, very easy. Straight away, this guy sprung to mind. Emil Smith-Rowe. What a player this guy is. I think he was immense on Sunday against Spurs. And for me, he was my man of the match. A young Jack Grealish in the making is what I've said here. And I think he really is. He wears his socks like him. He plays like him. If he can have that goal contribution as well, then I think in the coming years he'll be right up there. I also think he's surprisingly had a decent turn of pace on Sunday up against a flagging Arsenal fan in Matt Doherty. A few times he got down the left. And overall, very impressive. Obviously, like I've mentioned that shot against the crossbar. If that went in, that would have been superb and we'd have been off our seats. But yeah, I think his movement off the ball and obviously both on it, but creating space for others is a fantastically crucial part to Arsenal's attacking play. And you can really tell, when he's not in that team, the whole dynamic is completely different. So for me, he was easily the man of the match last week and easily the best player on the park. Matt, who was yours from last week?
I just want to say, your comparison to Jack Grealish, as long as it doesn't go as far as his lockdown restrictions and breaking those, or Jack Grealish is driving, as long as you're just comparing them on the pitch, then that's all right.
Yeah, fair enough. I think they're similar players. I think if they can, can keep up that form over the next few years, he'll be right up there. And it's nice to see Arsenal producing, obviously, the young talent, like I've mentioned in previous weeks. Saka, Smith-Rowe, Martinelli coming through. So it's nice to see. And on Sunday, before sort of December, he wasn't really in my thought pattern and in my process, but he came in that tough period and he really changed Arsenal's fortune. So for me, I think he really sort of epitomised his performance over the last few months, in that game against Tottenham on Sunday. So that's why he's in there for me.
I think his development is such a good one to look at because obviously he made his Arsenal debut and there was a lot of, not hype, but a lot of talk that he's going to be another one to come in, and he done okay. And then he goes out on a loan to Huddersfield. And that, if you look, I think people talk about him and say done well there. You look at the stats, and stats don't always tell the story. But if you look at the stats, he didn't return much from that loan in terms of goals and assists. And I don't think he was necessarily a regular starter every week in a Huddersfield team that were okay. Didn't pull up many trees. But since coming into the team, and I'm not sure, we'll never know whether it was a force that he had to be, put him in the team, then, he hasn't looked back and he's been superb. And he looks at home in the Premier League. Sometimes the young players will play well at the start and they'll dip. But he's one that's really had to go out and obviously get the loan. Whereas some of them, you look at Saka straight into the first team, and at that top level Premier League club, we talked about it before, not often do they actually go out on loan. They go straight into the first team. Talk about someone like a Marcus Rashford or Mason Greenwood. At 17, 18, they're deemed they're in, they're good enough. Where Emil Smith-Rowe is slightly older. I think 20 now.
Yeah, so I think something like that. Yeah,
had a loan, which was okay in the Championship, and then come back and really taken his opportunity.
I think maybe that shows that actually Arsenal potentially doubted. I don't want to say doubted his ability, but weren't as confident in him as players like Saka's, Martinelli's, players like that, and therefore he needed a loan. And maybe, obviously, if he didn't have these last few months, then he would have had another one in January, and maybe got a move away in the next couple of years. But fair play to him. He's been fantastic. And really, if you take him out of that Arsenal team, like I've said, it's a completely different dynamic going forward. So that's why he's in mine. Right, Matt, who have you gone for this week?
My player for last week is Iheanacho. Hat-trick against Sheffield United. 5 in his last 3. Just showing that Leicester aren't reliant on Jamie Vardy for the goals. We've talked before, the likes of Barnes chipping in. Obviously, he's now injured. Maddison chipping in with goals, adding goals to his game. But, I think Leicester slightly have relied on Jamie Vardy in the past to make sure he scores 20, 25 goals in the season. I think the signing of Iheanacho was a shrewd one at the time, and I really liked it. I've always liked him as a player, and he's just never really either had a run of games, or when he has had that run of games, really, really delivered. But what we're seeing now, say 5 in his last 3, playing regularly. I think he's a good finisher. I really like him. I think his physical attributes are really good. He's strong, but he can run in behind. And say a hat-trick against Sheffield United, I think you'll find that Sheffield United had never conceded more than 3 in a game while Chris Wilder was manager. First game without him, and they conceded 5.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
I'm not.
Wow.
I'm sure I heard that stat. I may be wrong, but I'm sure that was a stat that I heard. So that just shows you there. And
no, that sounds about right. I can't remember, especially in the last 2 years, so the sort of Premier League era of Chris Wilder, I can't remember them getting battered and conceding 5. I can remember a 3-3 against Man United, and that's probably about it. So yeah, Chris Wilder leaving, and obviously Iheanacho's capitalised on that, and since he's come into Leicester, like you've said, sort of they've relied on Jamie Vardy, but it's nice to see him now come to fruition. Obviously, Vardy had that period injured and he came into the team, but he's really continued that form, and I've been, very impressed with him. So yeah, good to see him in the goals. So this week's one, it was a bit of a struggle for me. Obviously, there's not many games this week due to the FA Cup quarterfinals, so I'm going with a Brighton player, someone who, I think he impresses me most times I see him play. Especially the last couple of times. Obviously, I mentioned that goal against Southampton. He scored against Tottenham as well. I don't think his numbers are great, but if he does improve them, I think he'll be a very decent Premier League player. And that's Leandro Trossard. Brighton playing Newcastle at home. I think it's a big game for both sides. Both sides sort of, in that relegation scrap, I think it's fair to say. A chance for Brighton to move 6 points clear of the relegation places. And I think this man will have a say in that come Saturday evening if Brighton do win the game. So for me, big opportunity for them and big opportunity for him against Newcastle. Who have you gone with?
The player. So tactically, the last player I pulled out the bag that was decent was a goalkeeper. So I've done that again. Again, not many games to choose from. I've gone with Meslier of Leeds, away at Fulham, Friday night game. Neither team have scored many goals of late. So I'm going to predict that there's not going to be any goals in this game either. But a young goalie that I really like, the typical modern day goalkeeper. First of all, when you just look at him and his physical build, but secondly, what he can do and his attributes. He's very good with the ball at his feet, although he did get caught out against Arsenal, I remember recently. Someone they trust to play out, really sweet left foot. Again, good size, deals with balls in the box, good shot stopper. I say originally brought in as a number 2 to Casilla, but has established himself as a number 1. Obviously, clean sheet last time out against Chelsea. 3 in his last 10, which is okay, but not bad for Leeds, a team that are typically ship goals. I think he also turned. I think he turned down Chelsea to go to Leeds when he signed there. Quite interesting.
Yes.
I think Chelsea were quite keen on him, but yeah, someone who's really impressed me this year. Been given the nod for Bielsa from the start of the season. I know we talked just before we started about Casilla. And the one game he played recently against Crawley, where I think he threw 2 in at least.
Yes,
No, but I say, just off the basis, first of all, of 2 teams that don't score a lot of goals or haven't scored a lot of goals recently, which is a surprise for Leeds because Leeds do generally score goals, and a goalkeeper who I really like.
Definitely, I think he's only just turned 21 at the start of March. So he got caught against Arsenal with the ball at his feet, but it's always nice to see keepers having that confidence. And fair play to Bielsa, who gave him a run of games in the team. As like we mentioned, Casilla was having a few stinkers last year. So yeah, good choice. I think he's got a good chance of a clean sheet against the Fulham side that maybe don't have a clear and obvious attacking threat. I think they've got players like Maja, Cavallero who are pretty hit and miss, and that's probably why they're at the bottom. So yeah, good choice. I think we'll see how that goes. Hopefully, it's not another flop like last week, but we'll see. Right. And the final thing we're going to talk about today, a topic that I'm very passionate about, and I'm sure you'll agree when I do say this. I think referees do need punishments or reprimands for their actions. I think VAR has really heated this debate up. Referees get away with too many poor decisions. It's not just in football, but in every job in the world, if you make a mistake, you're held accountable for it. And it seems that only referees are the people that get away with their decisions week in, week out. I mentioned that the Arsenal-Burnley game where Kevin Friend was on VAR, a blatant handball turned down, and then the next day he was refereeing Liverpool against Fulham. And now for me, that is completely ludicrous. I don't think he deserved that. Firstly, obviously, in the recent North London derby, Mourinho's speaking out over the penalty, and he wanted Michael Oliver to do an interview to explain his decisions and thought process. Do you think this is good or bad? Would you like to see it? I know I would personally.
I would like to see it. I think it would be interesting. I think you will not see it because I think the protection of referees, you will not see it. It's an interesting one because there are hundreds of decisions made in a game of football. Some you agree with, some you won't. Personal experience, I'll sit in the dugout and I will think, that's not a foul. And the opposite dugout will think, great decision. They think it's a foul. Every decision can be very, if you're doing interviews and you've got an interviewer asking, he could be there for hours asking him, what about this one? What about this one? What about this one? I don't think so. I think what I've noticed maybe lower down, especially at our level, is you're now after the game, you're not allowed really to speak to the referee officially anyway. Right. I think that was always something that maybe managers probably overstep the mark sometimes, not from experience, but obviously hearing things where, managers would be allowed to go and speak to the referee after the game. Yes. I think in a controlled environment, there's no reason why a manager can't ask the referee and get a reason. And if they get it, they don't necessarily have to agree with the reason. It might just be, I made this decision because from my angle, this is what I was going to see. We actually had an incident the other day with, it was actually a linesman and a ball had crossed the goal line. Obviously, we don't have goal line technology. And the linesman standing on the line. So you think, well, he can clearly see that. When he ran back down, well, how have you not given that goal? There was a player lying down in the way I couldn't see. And we said, well, this is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. How can you not see that? We then watched the video back. We actually saw a still picture and there was a player blocking his view. And as much as that is infuriating because the picture and the video showed the ball in the net and it could have been a massive moment for us in the game. Actually, his reasoning was correct. He couldn't guarantee that ball crossed the line because his view was blocked. And actually, it was you could tell that from the footage afterwards that he got that right. So I think if there's an opportunity where a manager can speak to a referee after the game, I think that changes things. I think the VAR is very different because you've got people sitting a long way away from the stadium making decisions or at least impacting on the decision that the referee made. And I think that's got better in terms of using the pitch side monitor. Referees are making more decisions themselves. They're just maybe being offered an advice or offered a go and have a look at the monitor, have another go, or, have another look at it, which I think is right. And I'm happy with that. I've got no problem with that. I think when the VAR is getting involved and doesn't need to get involved or missing things that are quite clearly obvious, that's more of a frustration for me. But could they do interviews? I'm going to say no. I don't think they should do interviews because it's going to open another can of worms. But should Mourinho have been able to probably sit down or stand in the same room and speak to Michael Oliver? Yes, probably. And if Michael Oliver said, this is what I saw, this is the reason I gave it, VAR back me up or agree with me, that's it. Mourinho can still be angry and disappointed. We're not going to change his mind and make him happy, but the referee has now given him the reason. I think what I find at our level is referees can quite often not want to talk, okay? Or you ask them a question, they don't want to answer the question. That could be because of years of abuse. And no one can sit here and say that referees don't get abused by players or by management or by obviously by fans as well. And it might be right, but I'm not going to speak anymore. You know, this is our new directive. We're not going to speak. But I think that is a frustration as well. When you don't know why a decision's given, or you want to understand it and they won't speak, that is a real frustration that I go through myself. So if there was an opportunity for them to review a decision, I know when we've in the past, the referee will say, "Oh, I'll watch it back on the video." Okay, well that's great, but you've watched it back, but maybe then you need to speak to us and say, "Oh, maybe I did get that wrong," and I hold my hands up. I got that one wrong. We're all humans. We're going to make mistakes. You know, referees are going to make mistakes. Should they make as many in the Premier League with VAR? No, of course they shouldn't.
I think watching the National League, especially from a linesman's perspective, is very refreshing because actually, you know, in the Premier League with VAR, their job is pretty much taken away from them. So I think, you know, from a linesman and a refereeing perspective, you know, obviously you experience that at a lower level. And watching that is, for me, a much more enjoyable experience. And that's why I'm really an advocate of taking VAR back out of the game, because I feel like it's just another layer of controversy that could be avoided in the Premier League. We've just touched on interviews. Should referees, though, be treated the same as players in management in terms of discipline after games? So, you know, if a player makes a bad decision, get sent off, or if a manager makes inappropriate comments, they get sent off and suspended. Should referees have the same for, you know, very poor decisions? You know, so a wrong red card given. So we're talking about lower leagues really, because in the Premier League that hopefully should be corrected with VAR. But should those referees have punishments like players and managers?
I'd like to say yes, but when you delve into it a little bit more and you think about if you have a scenario where if you make a wrong decision, you'll be punished and you won't referee next week, our referee's going to want to give decisions with the potential consequences. It's a difficult one. You know, it is massively difficult. I think maybe a totting up process where, cool, you know what, you've made a couple of bad decisions. We're going to take you out for a couple of weeks. And it's for your good, but also for everyone else's good, because you're making bad decisions week in, week out. Obviously, not many people will know, but there is punishments, such to speak. At the end of the season, referees can get moved up and down leagues and levels, and that's the same as clubs do. So in terms of season wide, you know, when we were in the Conference South, for example, we saw a lot of referees move up when we moved up. And at the same time, there was referees moving down from League Two into the National League, and that happens all the time. There's that moving floors of referees doing it. So it does happen in terms of that, but I think that should happen. Maybe a couple of bad decisions or poor game, not just necessarily one bad decision, because they've obviously made that decision for a reason. They believe they have seen something or whatnot. That's why they've made that decision. But it might just be a poor game, or for me, the more frustrating is not necessarily a one-off bad decision, which obviously could be costly. As little as we had one at the weekend, a free kick that was never a free kick, and now you know that's how the ref saw it. And don't worry, no one thought it was a foul. Either team, they score from the free kick. So that is the implication is massive. We lose the game by one goal. That goal is avoidable.
So just quickly, are you saying on that totting up process that potentially it could be similar to the 5 yellow cards process, obviously that has a cut-off point as well with players?
I'm not so sure. I think I say more things. Assessors are at every game. Referee assessors that watch the referee assess what they're doing. Scores are given out by teams out of 100, I believe, on how referees are performing. I'd imagine assessors are putting together some sort of report on a referee. I think if referees are consistently putting in bad displays, and at the end of the day, if there's a referee assessor there, and we have them at our level, so I'd imagine they're at Premier League level, they're being watched and scrutinised. So I think there'll be a time where the powers above need to intervene and say, hang on a minute, you need a couple of weeks out. Like I said before, it's not necessarily a punishment for them. It's helping them because they might be struggling. You know, it's like a player. A player could be out of form. They need a couple of weeks out. You know, I think, and it can work that way. Have a couple of weeks out. It saves the teams because that he could have been refereeing, because actually he's now not going to make another bad decision. It gives him a chance to maybe clear his head. It might be he made a bad decision 2 weeks ago and that's still in his mind, and he's worried about giving another pen or whatever. I think, you know, we got to think about them. I know they're not footballers, but think about the same there. But with a footballer, if they've missed a pen and they've now got to take another one, it's going to be playing in their head, isn't it? So I don't think you can necessarily ban a referee or punish a referee for one bad mistake. You know, but again, I'll bring in that at the higher level, the mistakes shouldn't necessarily be there. Or actually, sometimes the mistakes aren't the referee; it's the VAR that are actually not picking up on something or making the wrong decision or giving the wrong advice. So it's not necessarily the referee, but so that's what I think should happen. And actually, we don't know. Maybe it does happen. I don't keep a check on all the referees and what they're doing every week, and you know, and is this one out? And I know with the amount of games that's happening, and we're seeing games every night. And there's only so many referees that can do fixtures. And I think the example you gave last week with the Burnley Arsenal game, VAR, who was the referee?
Referee was Andre Mariner. VAR was Kevin Friend for that game.
So Kevin Friend did the VAR, and then he did a game the next day. Well, they're not going to take him off that game the next day.
No.
But what they could do is maybe after that game give him a week off. But I mean, I'm an advocate for VAR. Can they have a proper designated VAR referee rather than you know, the referees that do the games? You know, does that become an ex-player? Does that become you know, someone else that does that rather than a referee? Someone else is watching it and giving a different view. You know, because I think the argument we hear all the time is that, you know, they're not players, they don't understand football as that, and actually some of the decisions are really infuriating.
I've got to be honest, I do completely, you know, agree with you on the aspect of higher powers intervening to help the referees out. I think it would be harsh to say, you know, they make one or two bad decisions in a game and they're out next week. That's a lot more cutthroat than football management or football players are these days. So I like the idea of a totting up system, though. I think that should be implemented. Maybe it might be in the next 5 to 10 years if things like VAR are put down to sort of Championship, League 1, League 2 level. And, you know, I could see that happening over the next 10, 12 years. Right, mics for referees. Should this be a thing? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I think it works well in rugby, and it gives, you know, the average fan a clear explanation of why a decision has been made ultimately. So would you want to see this? Because personally, 100% would. I think it would be, you know, it would clear up a lot of the controversy. Even if I don't agree with it completely, I can sort of see where they're coming from or see by the book why they've given a decision.
I think for the match going fan, it's a must. Obviously, we haven't been to any games for a while now as a supporter standing or sitting in the stand, but I think the problems that we had, and I think all supporters will say, is just the unknown, not knowing what's happening. A VAR check is happening and no one knows why. You know, they weren't allowed to show replays in the ground because it would, you know, that was sort of what they're thinking. I think in Australia they do it really well. I think in their actual football soccer league they have mic'd up refs, and I've seen a couple of videos there, and I know there's been a lot of talk about it coming in here. Now I'm not sure if it's 100% going to happen, but I think it'd be absolute. If it does, I think it'd be massive to be in a stadium and being able to hear the referee, not for the whole game, but for those decisions that might get switched on or on the speaker, and you can hear the communications he's having between him and the VAR, and it gives everyone in the ground an understanding of, first of all, what they're looking at, whether it be an offside, whether it be a foul, a handball, and how they make that decision. And then everyone knows. And not everyone, doesn't mean we agree with it, but everyone knows what is going to happen.
100%. I mean, I don't think we're going to agree with every decision. I think to have that expectation is completely unrealistic. So just gaining a better understanding of why they've given a decision, you know, that's going to be satisfactory for me anyway. So the last point, I mean, you've already basically said your opinion, but I was going to ask you on VAR. would you have it in next season or not? Because for me, I wouldn't have it in. You know, you're going to have fans back next year, and obviously we only experienced it for sort of 2/3 of the season before lockdown came in. But even just the things like celebrating a goal, I can remember a few occasions the goals have been taken away from us. Socrates scored a last-minute winner against Crystal Palace, and the ground went mental, and then it was ruled out on VAR. For me, it just takes away a whole layer of going to a game and supporting a club. So would you take that layer of controversy back out of the game, and would that actually in turn maybe help referees because it doesn't give them another opportunity to back up an incorrect decision with another incorrect decision, which I think we're seeing a lot of times, especially with handballs, like I said last week, the Burnley-Arsenal game, with a poor decision on field and then another poor decision in VAR. So would you have it in next season or not?
I don't think the concept of VAR is necessarily the problem. I have the best of both because I'm not the biggest fan of it, and I get to experience football without it at work, which is great. But obviously there's times where we're desperate for it, and there'll be times where we're delighted it didn't happen. Our FA Trophy quarter-final, if there was VAR, we were going to penalties in the last kick of the game after conceding. You know, I talk about the game the other day. If there's VAR or goal line technology, the goal that the referee couldn't see or the linesman couldn't see is a goal. Now, my opinion is VAR is not necessarily the problem. It's the rules of the game, or the laws of the game, as they're called. The handball law. No one has a clue what's going on there. There's no defined right law. We saw the Fulham goal the other day against Spurs. We've seen the same night Kante handball against Liverpool. Bizarre, just correct decisions, bizarre laws. That's for me. The offside law. The infuriating part for everyone is the minuscule, the tiny little bit. There needs to be something clearer there. They're getting the lines out. That really frustrates me. You can see it or you can't. If you can't see it, it's not a what is the phrase they use? It's not an obvious error. So therefore, you don't overturn it. Similar to how I know, obviously, cricket for you, the umpire's call. They have that element of error. You know, if the umpire makes a decision, it might not 100% be the correct decision, but they can see why it's been sort of given. There's an element of doubt either way, so they stick with the referee's decision. You know, I think there needs to be more of that. I think if they can clear up those two ones for me, first of all, the handball law, I think there's got to be an expectation, or, you know, we've talked about whether it's accidental, not accidental. They've talked about the silhouette of the body and where then they're talking about the sleeve. Is it above the sleeve? Is it below the sleeve?
Yep.
I think there just needs to be a defined rule or law. They can easily see it on the replays for VAR, so then it makes it easier to make that decision. Same with the offside. I think when they start getting out the lines and they're offside by a minuscule, and you know, then the question is the line straight? The camera isn't always in line. Then is the line slightly diagonal? Is it? These questions. I think when you start looking at that, it just becomes a bit too much for me and a bit too precise. Football's not a game. It doesn't have to be that precise. I think we're looking at obvious things. You know, was he obviously offside? I've heard people talk about daylight. I think that's too big.
Yes.
You know, if that's massive, the scope there for being onside is so big, and the amount of goals we'll see, you'd be crazy. But I think there can be in between. They can find something that really works, and if they can, and I know they're obviously going to change the handball law at the end of the season off the back of I think the Fulham goal against Spurs that was disallowed really, really pushed it. But they're going to change that. Still think they can change some things with the offside law. And if they do it right, then VAR will work. And the introduction of mics, yes, there still will be times where you'll celebrate a goal and it'll be disallowed. Unfortunately, that's the way it goes. And you'd like to think it evens it out. It may not. But VAR will be here to stay. I think the money that's been spent to bring it in, they're not going to take it away after a couple of years. But if they can correct the laws or make them streamline and make them easier to understand and give decisions, then I think it'd make it a lot easier. I
think the offside one is a huge talking point. I think one thing I've seen recently is Arsene Wenger's proposal, where basically it's so the attacker's foot, if that's in line with the last defender, doesn't matter how far forward the rest of their body is, then they're onside. Now, for me, that's obviously way too extreme. If they can find something in the middle of that and the current law, I think we're on for a winner. I think that'd be good. But also the thing you said about cricket there, I completely agree with that. You don't see anyone talking about cricket that is, the decisions don't really take, they're not the main highlight of the game. It's hard to explain really unless you watch cricket. But obviously with the umpire's call when the ball is clipping the stumps, I think it's very similar to the offside thing. But then again, at the same time, you're not going to have people complaining about it too much. But yeah, without me rambling too much there, because I'm aware I've rambled quite a lot, I think we'll wrap it up for this week. Matt, it's been a real pleasure to have you on, mate. Obviously, we're recording this on Wednesday because Friday, I believe, you're travelling to Hartlepool, I think it is, for a big game. So best of luck in that. I might be watching that, I might not be. But anyway, best of luck for that. Make sure to check the Instagram, like I said, for the highlights of the North versus South game on FIFA 21 that I have recorded. And hopefully in the next 3 or 4 weeks, we'll be back face-to-face and recording in a slightly different way. So yeah, all the best for Saturday, mate. And again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for listening, guys, and see you later. Keep talking football.